Hello and welcome back to the PHP 101 course. In this video what we're going to talk about is loops. In the last video we talked about arrays, so now I'm going to show you a way that we can use arrays and also just a really powerful way to program. So what I want to do is let's just go ahead to scripts here and let's create a new file and we'll just call it loops. And actually put a new file in scripts and we're just going to call that new file loops.php, and we'll open some PHP tags, skip down a few lines, and we'll close those. Alright, so there are a couple different types of loops that I want to go over with you. The first one, and one of the more common ones, is a for loop. So I'm just going to make a comment there. So the for loop, what a for loop does is basically it's a simplified, compact loop that you can write. And what's cool about loops is, humans get bored of doing the same thing over and over again, and this is where computers shine, because computers don't get bored and computers can do the same thing over and over again very quickly. So let's pretend that we had a typing class and we were in our typing class and we got caught looking at the keyboard, and our teacher told us, hey, I want you to type 500 times I will not look at the keyboard, and I want those I want you to number those at the beginning of each line, and I want it to be perfectly typed. So you could either type that out or copy and paste and change each one, or you can write a PHP loop to do that for us. So a for loop looks like this. So you say for, you open and close some parentheses, and then you open and close some square braces. So let's talk about what we want to do inside of our for loop. Well, the first thing is we need to have something to count by, because if you just tell it to do a loop and you don't give it an incrementer or a way to know how many times to loop, it'll do it infinitely. And an infinite loop is actually a problem because it'll use up all your memory and it'll eventually crash your system. And so we want to make sure that we make sure that we count. So let's create an iterator, and the way that we're going to do that is just we're going to say I is equal to 0. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to, each time we loop through this, we're going to add 1 to the I, so that this I will keep incrementing. The next part of the loop after the semicolon is we want to actually do our check. So we want to say if I is less than 500. So this loop's going to run every single time it evaluates this as long as I is less than 500. The next thing we want to do is we actually want to make sure that we increment this. And the for loop allows us to do this all in one line here inside the parentheses. And so what we do is we say I plus plus. And so what this will do is it'll go through the loop one time, and when it goes through this loop, I is equal to 0. It checks and says, hey, is I less than 500? Yes, 0 is less than 500, so it does what's inside of these brackets here. Then when it's done doing what's inside of these brackets, it adds 1 to I. So the next time it comes to the loop, I is equal to 1. And it keeps doing that until it gets up to 500. And it'll say, is 500 less than 500? No, technically it's not. It's the same as 500. So then what it's going to do is skip over this closing brace and go on to the next line of code. So let's, in our example where we get caught cheating and typing, let's go ahead now and let's just inside of here, let's echo, and then she wanted this numbered, so we're just going to echo I, and then we're going to concatenate on a colon, and then we're going to say I will not look at the keyboard while I type. Okay, and then what I want to do is we're going to concatenate on, we're just going to also add a break tag here so it'll go to the next line. So this is going to actually run 500 times, and it's going to go 500 because this starts at 0. Alright, so if that was our assignment, this is all we would actually have to type. So let's now go to our scripts and go to loops.php and hit enter, and now you can see that it counts, it shows our iterator, which is I, and this will go on to 500 times. Actually, it goes on to 499, and the reason it is because this one starts at 0. So let's go ahead and take care of that. This is printed 500 times, but this number is just wrong. So if we want that to start with 1, we could just say echo I plus 1. Okay, so now if we refresh, you see how fast that did that. So computers are very fast at repeating themselves, so this creates a loop. This is not necessarily a practical thing to do, although you will be echoing things out in loops a lot. For example, you could have a table, and for every row in your database you want to print a table to the screen, so you would actually do this. But this is just a silly little example. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower, instead of saying 500, I don't want this to take up so much room, so I'm just going to say 10 and leave the example there like that. Now if I refresh the page, it's just 1 through 10. Okay, so that's a for loop. A for loop will just do whatever's inside of these brackets as long as this evaluates to true. Okay, so we set up I is equal to 0. Let me show you another way. Something else that we can do is we could have written this with a while loop, and so a while loop is very similar, and it's just a little bit different syntax. So a while loop, you just say while, and what we're going to do is we have to set up the I is equal to 0 before the loop, and then what we're going to say is as long as I is less than 10, do whatever's in here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, except for I'm going to type I'm in the while loop. Okay. Alright, so now if we go and refresh the page, well, we see we got a problem. See, it's still running. This is an infinite loop, so I'm going to stop that script. This would have run indefinitely, and if we look over here at our scroll bar, it has gone on for quite a long time. But if you notice, it's got 1 each time. So this will run our computer out of memory. So what we have to do is we have to remember inside of here, inside of the loop, we need to increment I. So we'll do I++. Now this will not be a loop that goes on forever and ever. It just goes 1 through 10. So that's the difference between a for loop and a while loop. It's just if you're counting something like outside of here, sometimes I use while with database returns, but a while loop it's just a loop. It's just a different way of writing a loop. Just want you to be aware of it because you will see this in code and you need to know what it is. There's also something called a do-while loop, and a do-while loop is the same as a while, but what it does is it will run the first one no matter what. Okay, so we're not even going to show an example of that. Just know that it exists. I don't think it's necessary to show an example of that at this time. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at a for each loop. Okay, and a for each loop can look, basically what we want to do in a for each loop is set up an array. So I'm going to set up my favorite colors, and favorite colors, we'll just put some colors in here: red, green, purple, and I don't really know if these are my favorite colors. I'm just putting some in here. Alright, so these are some colors, and then I want to loop through these and echo something to the screen. So what I can do is say for each, open and close some parentheses, and then open and close curly braces. And we're going to say is for each favorite colors as color. So what it's going to do is it's going to loop through this array, and each time it does that, it's going to set this part to the value of the array. So the first time it runs through, this is going to be equal to red. The next time it runs through, it's going to be green, and then purple, and then blue, and then it won't run again. So I'm just going to go ahead and echo. So I'm going to echo color, and we'll concatenate on a break tag. And now, if I go back and refresh the page, you can see red, green, purple, blue. So this is the way that we can use a loop and an array together to do something for each thing that's in the inside of the array. So you might be asking, well, what about associative arrays? So I'm going to show you an example of that. And for the associative array, what we do is we say, what's a good example? Let's just say, let's use our person again, and we're going to say is equal, we'll do first name, and that is equal, and you know what we could do? We could do first name like this, and we'll make that equal to Curtis, and we'll say last name Parham, age 38, and that I'll just leave that. Oh, we'll do one last thing. Job web developer. Alright, and then what we can do is we're going to loop through, so for each person as, and now instead of just doing person as the value, we're going to say the person as the key, and then we'll use that syntax and we'll say value. So we're doing a key value pair is what we call this. So for each element in this array, it's going to set this up as the key, and it will set the value as value. So what we can do here is we can actually do something like outside of the loop, we could say echo attributes of a person, and then just do a break tag there. And then inside the for each loop, we'll just say for each person as key value pair, and then we're just going to echo, and let's echo, let's see, let's echo a B tag. And inside the B tag, we're going to break out of here and we'll say key. And then what I want to do is we'll put a space, and then we're going to concatenate on value. So what this will do is it'll echo out the key value pairs inside of here, inside this person array. Okay, so let's look at that. So it says attributes of a person, first name Curtis, last name Parham, age 38, job, web developer. So let's clean it up a little bit. So we also want to concatenate on, at the end of that, we'll do a break tag so that it goes down to a new line. So attributes of a person, first name Curtis, last name Parham, age 38, job web developer. So the reason that this is really cool to do is because you know, in a database you could very well have something like this as a user, and you could use those values inside of stuff that you're printing to the screen. Okay, and so at any rate, you could do this with a multi-dimensional array. You could do this with lots of things, but that is how loops work. So go ahead and practice some loops. I want you to do some for loops, some while loops, some for each loops, and if you really want to, go ahead and do a do while loop. You can find that at php.net, but I personally haven't used it. I'm sure there'll come a time in my career where it'll be the perfect scenario for a do-while loop. It just doesn't come up very often. So in a 101 course, we're just going to skip it for now. But this is pretty much each type of loop that you will see in very commonly in PHP. So you get the for loop, the while loop, and the for each loop. Alright, so let's just go ahead now and add that to our pages. So go to pages and we will duplicate the template. And let's call this arrays.php. Alright, well I'm not sure why it's not. Oh, here it is. So now we have arrays. Oh, I tried to duplicate it. It's not arrays. I'm stupid. It's actually, we're going to duplicate it and call it loops.php. So in here, we'll just change to loops. We'll say loops repeat code and remember to not create an infinite loop. Alright, so let's go ahead and go over to php.net and find some documentation on loops. Alright, I'll just go to for loop. Alright, so here's the page for loops. And let's go over here and paste that URL right there for the PHP manual. And then here we just need to replace this with loops, and this with loops, and this with loops. And we'll make sure you go ahead and put this video's embed code down here. Add yourself some notes here as you're practicing. The last thing we need to do is add this to our menu. So go to the menu.php and copy the last line and paste it and change everywhere that says arrays to loops. So loops, and then here we will make that like that. So now let's go back to our site and double check it. So now we have loops in the menu. If we go here, we got our results and our code. And if we go to the PHP manual, it takes us right to the for loop. You can find the other loops from there. Alright guys, well I hope that clears up what a loop is. In the next video, I think what we'll do is jump into functions. And functions allow us to not repeat code. So I will see you there and have a great day. Oh yeah, and if you haven't yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the like button.